into the chat function, but covidsupport@intertradeireland.com. So, I'm not going to keep you too long. Time is clearly precious, but I just want to talk very quickly about a couple of the supports, the two main supports that InterTrade Ireland have to assist businesses at this time. EBS is the first of those. So EBS offers up to £2,000 fully funded consultancy support for businesses. We've seen a lot of these, an awful lot of these actually in recent weeks and months. We're offering the type of help with regards to emergency cash flow. So it's looking at business. Obviously, businesses have seen, in many cases, have seen a deterioration in turnover. And obviously that has an impact on cash flow. So it's maybe bringing in the services of an accountant to come in and look at your cash flow, look at what you can do, looking at debtors, looking at creditors, looking at loan applications, looking at government supports. So that's very, very common, very popular aspect of the support. Other things that people are using it for is to look at the whole HR piece. Obviously, a lot of businesses are having to look at their staff levels, and in some cases there's some redundancies required. So a lot of help there with regards to looking at contracts of employment and things, health and safety, as we're going to talk about today, business risk. So there's a lot there that EBS can help with, and I would encourage you to look on our website, to look at the eligibility criteria, and if you think it's appropriate to go through the application form. The second is eMerge. If you could just flick on to eMerge for me, David, please. Yes, eMerge offers up to £2,500 fully funded support to help business develop online sales and e-commerce solutions. So again, I've been involved with this, assessing applications, looking at terms of reference and things. And I'm seeing a lot of stuff come across the desk. Search engine optimization is a big one. Looking at websites, very importantly, looking at e-commerce. Businesses that had previously sold via their own website are now looking at that as an avenue to drive sales. So there's an awful lot that can be done through the eMerge support to help businesses. So again, I would encourage you to go onto the InterTrade Ireland website, look at the eligibility criteria, look at and the very, very brief application form. It takes no time at all to complete the application form, and see if InterTrade Ireland can help you at this very uncertain time. So as I promised, I wouldn't keep you too long, so I'm pleased to be able to hand you over to the guys from Miller McCall Wiley, who have put together some great content for us. So David and Ashley, over to you guys.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Shane. Thanks very much. Just go back to the agenda here. So I'm going to start by talking initially about the key health and safety legislation that has been in place for many years before COVID-19. And then I'm going to talk about the COVID-19 specific regulations that have been brought in place this year, and then talk about some main issues arising and the main areas of risk. Then I'll pass you on to David then, who's going to talk a bit more about policies, procedures and guidance for staff, and then the impact of health and safety on the Employment Rights NI Order 1996. And then he's going to finish with a bit of information about support for businesses. So just, sorry, just getting the slide here. Sorry, so just to start off with, the overarching health and safety obligations on an employer are set out in Articles 4 and 5 of the Health and Safety at Work Northern Ireland Order 1978. Article 4.1 states it shall be the duty of every employer to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety and welfare at work of all his employees. And that duty extends to include the provision and maintenance of plant and systems of work that are as reasonably practicable, safe and without risks to health. Article 5 also requires that employers take all reasonably practical steps to ensure the health, safety and welfare of anyone else impacted by their operations. That would be clients, customers, etc. And also the order also puts responsibility on employees to comply with health and safety measures put in place by their employer. So another key important piece of legislation is the management of health and safety at work regulations. And that requires employers to carry out suitable and sufficient risk assessments. So Regulation 3.1 states that every employer shall make a suitable and sufficient assessment of the risks to the health and safety of his employees to which they are exposed whilst they are at work, and B, the risks to the health and safety of persons not in his employment arising out of or in connection with the conduct by him of his undertaking. And we'll look a bit more about risk assessments a bit later on in the webinar. So there's a number of associated regulations that sort of flow from the health and safety order, and they're all still relevant today. So that includes the workplace health and safety and welfare regulations, the reporting of injuries, diseases, and dangerous occurrences regulations, personal protective equipment at work regulations, the control of substance hazardous to health regulations, and the health and safety display screen equipment regulations, and there's many more as well. So whilst every workplace will have its own particular challenges, there's certain guiding principles apply across the board. And these include that a comprehensive risk assessment is conducted, is recorded in writing. Special attention to vulnerable employees, for example, making reasonable adjustments for pregnant workers, disabled workers. This is actually also likely to be relevant for employees who may have been hospitalized by the virus, particularly if they've been in ICU, where they may take a long time to recover. Employers are also required to ensure a safe system of operation is put in place to mitigate risk, and that employees are fully versed and trained in this. Employers must also conduct regular checks and surveillance to ensure that their employees are complying with their health and safety obligations. So it's important to note that failure to comply with health and safety legislation can result in both criminal and civil liabilities for employers. It's also worth noting that you do not actually have to cause an injury or harm to be in breach of health and safety law. You just need to create a risk of harm and fail to control it. And obviously, the health and safety order and the many other regulations that I've talked about there, they've all been written before COVID-19, but they're still just as applicable today and as relevant as they've ever been. So just go on to talk a bit about the COVID-specific regulations. So this year, there's been the introduction of regulations, legislation, and guidance in response to COVID-19. These include the Coronavirus Act 2020, the Health Protection Coronavirus Restrictions Regulations, and the Health Protection Coronavirus Wearing of Face Covering Regulations. So the Health Protection restrictions, they deal with restrictions on businesses and gatherings. And they also outline what businesses are subject to closures and restrictions. Yes, so obviously currently this applies to sort of close contact services such as hairdressers and beauticians. There's also restrictions on hotels, bars and restaurants, and these are currently in place until at least next Friday, when that's going to be reviewed by the executive. The regulations also still support working from home if possible. And it reiterates that employers should implement procedures that are reasonably practical to protect their employees and members of the public from the virus. So the health and protection face covering regulations, they state that face coverings are now mandatory in certain settings unless you have a reasonable excuse. They also state that the face visors or shields do not offer the same protection as a cloth face covering, which sits directly over the nose and mouth. And if you want to wear a face shield or a visor, you should also wear a cloth face covering. So employers should pay careful attention to these regulations and the government guidance, as it's constantly changing and regularly updated. And that link there that I've put in the slides is a very useful guide. It's called the Guide to Coronavirus Restrictions in Northern Ireland and the Public Health Advice. And that's regularly updated, and it's definitely worth having a look at. So just go on to talk about sort of main areas of risk arising out of COVID-19. So COVID-19, it hasn't downgraded or changed any existing health and safety law, but employers are now, now must consider their existing obligations alongside the new regulations and guidance. So what does an employer have to do specifically in relation to coronavirus? So first thing to do is to make a COVID-19 risk assessment tailored to its workplace and the dangers of coronavirus. Employers should also set up a safe system of work identified by that risk assessment, and then make sure that the safe system is followed. Another useful guide to look at is on the NI Business Info website called COVID-19 Working Through This Together, Practical Guide to Making Workplaces Safer. So that outlines, it's a very useful guide, outlines a lot of guidance, but it gives 5 key points to making the workplace safe. And that is to carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment, develop cleaning, hand washing and hygiene procedures, help people to work from home if that's possible, 2-meter social distancing where possible, and if 2-meter social distancing isn't possible, then put in measures like plexiglass screens to manage transmission risk. And the link there is at the bottom there. So in terms of carrying out a risk assessment, you do not necessarily need specific training or qualifications to carry out a risk assessment, but you should ensure that whoever is carrying out the risk assessment is familiar with the updated government guidance and any other existing public health advice. HSENI have helpfully provided an example template on their website specifically for COVID-19, and the link, that link there takes you directly to that. It doesn't actually cover all, it obviously doesn't cover all scenarios, so each employer should consider their own unique circumstances. So specifically relating to coronavirus, employers need to record from their risk assessment where the hazards lie, consider who may be at risk from harm, evaluate the risks and decide whether existing precautions are adequate, and if not, what more should be done. Record your findings, and then review your assessment and revise if necessary. So given that the guidance and information relating to COVID-19 is constantly developing and changing, you should treat your COVID-19 risk assessment as a living document and expect to review and update it frequently. And the risk assessment will also have to cover the practices of employees, and that will also include working from home. So there appears to be 3 main areas of risk to consider when combating COVID-19, the spread of COVID-19 in the workplace. And that seems to come from people, containing the threat spread of infection by air, and then limiting exposure by direct contact. So the following here is a few examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's just some measures that could be taken to combat against COVID-19. So in terms of people, ensure your employees are aware of the symptoms of the virus, and that both employee and employer take immediate steps to ensure any infection is contained, and obviously follow the public health advice. So for containing the threat by air, implementing measures such as social distancing, increase ventilation in the workplace, PPE, face coverings, but that's obviously subject to your line of work and the current guidance, and also plexiglass screens installed where necessary. Meetings conducted remotely instead of in person. Also limiting the numbers accessing certain areas of the workplace at any one time. For example, entrances and exits, communal areas such as the kitchen, and potentially staggering arrival and departure times of employees, and introducing a one-way system. Also, having staff work back to back or side to side rather than facing each other is another way. So for trying to limit exposure to the virus by direct contact, measures to introduce could include regular hand washing to be encouraged, and hand washing facilities and hand sanitizer to be readily available in the workplace. Cleaning the workplace more often, doing a deep clean of the workplace, wiping down surfaces regularly such as phones, computers, worktops, photocopiers, and obviously no hot desking. And just to reiterate, there are only some examples of measures that can be taken, and obviously each business will have its own specific needs and risks, and should each take adequate time to assess the risks imposed due to its own circumstances. And just a few additional considerations before I hand you over to David. So employers will have to refer to the specific guidance to their relevant sector, as workplaces, as there may be specific obligations for your specific workplace for you to consider. Deciding on a course of action will require a balancing exercise, but it is advisable that you carefully document your decision-making process in case you have to justify it at a later stage. And ask yourself, are we doing everything that is reasonably practical? Carrying out our COVID-19 risk assessment, cleaning, social distancing, increasing ventilation in the workplace. There's still an emphasis on the existing requirement to consult with employees in assessing workplace risk and in developing and reviewing workplace health and safety policies. So communication with your employees is key. And it's extremely important to keep up to date with the latest guidance and public health advice, as it's constantly changing, and you have to be prepared to adapt. And also just a point of reassurance, HSC have said that they will take a pragmatic and proportionate approach towards any potential enforcement action. But if any employers are struggling with making a decision, or if they have any concerns about health and safety, then there's always the option of seeking legal advice or advice from a health and safety consultant. So I'll just pass you over to David here, and he's going to talk a bit more about policies, procedures, and guidance for staff.
Thanks, Ashley. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for dialing in for this, and thanks to Shane and all the guys at InterTradeIreland for having us. So really, I'm going to have a little discussion around policies, procedures, guidance for staff. I suppose practically what employers should be doing in order to ensure that they're crossing all their T's and dotting all their I's. And then really at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So feel free to use the chat facility, and Ashley and I will do our best to answer any questions that you might have. So first and foremost then really, Ashley has outlined the importance of having a risk assessment and what the minimum standards are within the workplace to ensure the health and safety of all employees and customers as well. So in terms of, I suppose on a practical level, the first step that you must do is ensure that you have a robust health and safety policy. Now, this has been highlighted significantly by the COVID-19 pandemic, and essentially it has been, I suppose, never as important as what it is now. And I know that really at the beginning of lockdown, there was an awful lot of businesses had got in contact with us to really seek some advice on how to, I suppose, navigate the health and safety procedures and legislation and put things into a user-friendly format that their employees would be able to follow. So the first step, as I've said, is to get a good health and safety policy in place. And this is both a legal requirement, but obviously also essential to mitigate against risks on a practical level and ensure that really you're doing all that you can in order to avoid risks to your staff. Primarily, we'll be looking at the sort of COVID-specific risks, but generally, as Ashley outlined, the legislation hasn't fundamentally changed in that the requirements that employers have under or pursuant to COVID-19 have been around for a long time, and generally these can apply to all situations in the workplace. But in saying that, we've found ourselves in a really unique position in that we're battling a pandemic whereby there is, well, person-to-person spread, and of course there is the long incubation period as well, which is making it even more difficult to contain. So in light of that, I think employers should look at updating, amending their existing policies to ensure that they are compliant around COVID-19 changes. And therein, I suppose, lies a bit of the difficulty with all of this, in that COVID-19 changes, well, the guidance changes quite often. The legislation, the COVID-specific regulations have changed significantly, and there has been sort of a lot of conflicting guidance out there as to what employers must do, and really what the best practice is. So it's not easy. I appreciate it's not easy for any employer at the moment to really try and keep updated on the situation. But I think there was quite a few sources there that Ashley had highlighted, and I think the best thing to do is to really consider, well, what is the position on maybe a weekly basis, or if there's any recent announcements by the government, then you have to be quite reactionary and adapt, which is of course difficult, but it's also essential to do your part to reduce the spread, but also to reduce your risks as an employer. Now, under the Health and Safety at Work Order 1978, one of the key obligations within that is to provide training and information to your staff about health and safety. So you must really do that, and also provide a written statement or general policy of what your health and safety position is within the workplace. So in terms of even the provision of training and information, well, one of the I suppose benefits of the COVID-19 situation is that there has been an awful lot of information in the media to employees as to what they should be doing. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mitigate an employer's risk. What all employers must do is provide signs, maybe information in the workplace, and even quite simple yet practical things, such as markings on the floors to ensure there's social distancing, maybe alerting people to sort of common touch points, maybe the button on a lift, for example, areas where there's maybe frequent contact, and maybe it's impossible to keep those areas as sanitary as required. So quite basically, informing your employees as much as possible on the means as to how they can prevent the spread. Then even information on, well, what to do if you display symptoms. So if employees should be advised perhaps that if they have any symptoms, they should not be coming into work, and if they develop symptoms whilst in work, that they must leave. So simple things like that, which maybe seem obvious, still need to be I suppose, provided to staff, and you need to keep them informed as to, well, what your position is and what they must be doing. And then, as outlined in section 4.3, there must also be a written statement or general policy of what your health and safety should contain, what your health and safety rules are. So looking specifically then at the what your health and safety policy should contain. So generally, it's sort of a tri-part 3 area policy document. And this statement should set out really what your organization's commitments are to managing health and safety, and what your aims are. And the first part to many of these policy statements is to have what's known as a statement of intent. And this is really a way of setting out, well, what's the organization's philosophy and commitment to health and safety? What way are you going to, I suppose, reassure your employees that there is not a reasonable belief that there is a risk to their health and safety in the workplace? And then it should really set out the goals, sort of what the aims are, and how the organization is going to meet those, and how they're going to plan, organize, control, monitor and review their health and safety policies to ensure that their employees are safe. So if you think of it almost like a sort of a forward or a mission statement in a way, that's kind of setting out in strong terms really as to, well, what's our position here on health and safety, and I suppose providing a little bit of confidence to your employees that you're doing as much as is reasonably practicable. And in line with that, it's best then to have that signed and dated by the most senior person within the organization. And that gives the statement, of course, some authority and leadership. The second part really within any health and safety policy then should be who really has responsibility. So this should outline the names and positions as to who has specific responsibilities. So maybe we'll say your first aider is Ashley Black, or the person that you should report maybe your concerns about COVID symptoms to your line manager. It'll set out exactly who is responsible, and also what an employee's sort of lines of contact are. The next then, third part of any policy, health and safety policy, should be your sort of arrangements. So this is more on a sort of practical level as to, well, how you're going to have safe systems of work. And this can be for sort of low level possible hazards in the workplace. It can be something that is issued verbally to your employees. But in the present circumstances, looking particularly at COVID-19, where the hazard is of grave concern, and it's quite difficult to contain, it is best to really ensure that any sort of risk management process is formally written. Then you would have your rules really, and this is to remind people of the mandatory behaviour that they must perform in the workplace, and it's written down to avoid any sort of ambiguity. It also affords the employer that protection of having documentary evidence that they have reminded people of what the mandatory behaviour is. And these rules could be, for example, employees must never come to work if they're displaying symptoms, or employees must always self-isolate if they have been on holiday to one of the countries without the air bridge, for example. And also within rules, I suppose a key thing to think about here as well is your organization's disciplinary procedure. So if it's a case that an employee is not following the rules in the workplace, if they're not maybe adhering to social distancing, if they have come into work when they shouldn't have, then you might want to have a look at really ensuring that your disciplinary procedure is up to date to take into account any disciplinary action that you might want to take for an employee's failure to follow health and safety. Because bear in mind, not only is there the risk of a rogue employee causing risks to their own health in the workplace, they're also then putting others at risk, and the employer could potentially be in difficulties in terms of criminal and civil liabilities, as Ashley had pointed out earlier. The third aspect then is procedures. This will really ensure that something is done a particular way. This could be, for example, regular cleaning of touch or contact points, that employees should sanitize their hands upon entering the building, upon leaving the workplace. And this is really a good way of setting out, well, what are your clear standards here of performance? And then the fourth part is standards, which will build a positive culture and help to control the risk. It should set out who does what, where, and when. So, for example, how often your policy is going to be reviewed. Will senior management review it on a monthly basis? Will it say that this policy will be reviewed depending any changes to government guidance or government legislation? And really, these are things that are measurable. So essentially, you should be able to go through your policy, perhaps if you were reviewing it in a month's time, and think, well, we can confirm that we have achieved that. We did review this policy when there was the announcement that we had to only perhaps in a restaurant setting, we could only provide takeaway services and things like that. So it really should be almost a sort of tick box whereby, oh, well, we've achieved that. We can demonstrate we've done that. And that's really the final part of your policy. Now, the Health and Safety Executive provide a brilliant website, and you may want to go on to read a little bit more about exactly how your own specific organization or company or business wants to I suppose amend the policy, any existing policy, or introduce one if you don't already have one. And of course, always seek advice to ensure that it is meeting the statutory minimum, and that it's also fit for purpose, and it's achieving what you want out of it. The next thing then really to look at is in terms of communication. So really, it seems a very obvious point, but it's essential that your policy has been well communicated to your employees. Really, in order for everyone to properly understand the policy and understand what your rules are, what your position is in terms of health and safety rules, it's best to really ensure that you're providing training, meetings or briefings, perhaps email updates to your staff. And you do have that duty under the 1978 Act to provide that information and training to your employees. Then the other important part of, I suppose, ensuring that the other important consideration in ensuring that there has been communication to all staff is to consider, well, how are you going to deal with inductions for new employees? Now, things are slightly different now in that people are onboarding or starting to work or begin their employment maybe remotely, and then gradually maybe they're going into the workplace, or maybe they're always going to be working remotely for the foreseeable. But it's not as easy for employees that are new starts to be exposed to information and training as those that have been perhaps with your organization or business for a long period of time. So other difficulties even with that is if, say, you have a new employee who has started physically in a workplace, but there's maybe only skeleton staff, or there is sort of rotational staff, and you don't have sort of a full complement of employees, then these new employees are not going to be exposed to maybe the same experience, the same level of information, maybe aren't going to be as aware of the chains of command and who is responsible. So that's why it is so important to provide good training and information and have a good policy. The other thing is really that in terms of new employees, they could also be on maybe reduced hours, or maybe other members of staff are on flexible furlough. So it is going to be more difficult maybe for employees that are new to your business to ask questions. So I think it's important to make sure that everyone is comfortable that if they need to, they can approach someone and find out, well, what is our health and safety policy? How does it apply in practice? And what they should be doing to, I suppose, have a bit of personal responsibility for their health and safety and that of their colleagues. Third aspect here is actually to review and revise your health and safety policies. Now, one of I find the most important and helpful ways in order to review and improve your health and safety policy is actually to sort of get some feedback from your employees. They can pick up on aspects that for improvement that they're seeing maybe on the ground or in their day-to-day working that maybe management or senior management are too far removed from. I think they're your best source of seeing, well, what's working well, what's not working well, what needs to be improved. And this could be as simple as asking employees to provide their feedback. It could be maybe even that you have a few employees from different teams or different divisions of your organization that are responsible for having maybe informal chats or formal chats with their colleagues to identify, well, how are they feeling about the workplace and how they're working? Are there any ways that they feel that they are being put at risk? Is that risk there unnecessarily? Is there a way in which we can have a solution to mitigating that? So really, communication with employees is, well, I suppose, one of the key things to really consider and ensure that you have a sort of open door policy. And as I said, really, there should be continuous monitoring and reviews of your practices and policies. And this is so important at the moment, considering that the guidance is changing so often, so much. There's one minute there is full lockdown and very strict measures. Then there's a bit of a sort of easing of measures. Then all of a sudden we're back into stricter measures, and there's different businesses being affected in different ways, and some businesses can keep going, others can't, in terms of the risk. So it is vitally important really to keep up to date as much as possible. It's not easy, which is why you might want to sort of seek a bit of advice. There's some sort of conflicting points within guidance, and it can be quite difficult to navigate through to identify exactly what the situation is. But really, I suppose at the moment, employers are all in the same boat and trying to sort of wade their way through as much as possible. And the other consideration for any employer when looking at sort of the communication of an effective health and safety policy is to review that policy whenever there is maybe a change to personnel. So obviously, if you have a health and safety officer who has left the organization, or you have a change to your working premises, any new equipment, then of course you need to update your policy. Specifically though, as I've just said, when there's new guidelines issued, then of course you need to review your policy as well. And then finally, in terms of whether there is any complaints raised by employees. So if an employee has made a disclosure to you that they're concerned about certain risks within the workplace, you are going to, once you have notice of those, you're going to have to really seek to reduce that risk, make things safer, and then of course try to incorporate this into a new way of dealing with this, mitigating this into your policy. So then, well, moving on then to the management of health and safety at work regulations. So I'd said that one of the key things that employers must do is ensure that employees are provided with adequate health and safety training. So upon recruitment into your organization, they should receive training. If there's any new or increased risks, then of course they should be provided with substantive training. If there's new technology being introduced, you know, even outside of this COVID pandemic, if you're introducing something into the workplace that is maybe difficult to use or there's a risk in using it, then you must provide training on that new equipment. Then in terms of introducing a new system of work or a change in respect of the system of work that's already in place, you must also provide training. So that's very relevant to our current circumstances, in that you know, the new way in which we work is to employ social distancing measures, you know, sanitizing frequently, perhaps depending on the line of work that you do, maybe your employees need to wear masks or PPE. Maybe it's that you have to train staff on taking their temperature when they arrive into work, or maybe it's to ensure that there is a sort of clean after use policy of any touch points within the workplace. Crucially, training is to occur during working hours. So it isn't something that you can really get your staff to do outside of work on an unpaid basis. And then the training must be repeated periodically. So with the actual implementation then of the training, you need to identify, well, how much training is necessary, and of course proportionality is key. You might want to look at, should you get a specialist to provide some training? Should you perhaps get your employees to attend a Zoom webinar where there is health and safety training delivered? Are you going to get someone within your existing organization to really provide some practical tips and skills to your staff on how to be aware of the health and safety policy and what your procedures are? And then one consideration also, as always, is to consider the feedback from your employees. Are they happy with the sort of awareness that they have as to what your policies and procedures are? Do they feel that they maybe need more training? And they should really have sustained engagement in this issue. They're the ones that are going to be best able to I suppose, advise you as to their knowledge on health and safety, and whether maybe they need a bit more information. Key thing, as always, is for any employer to keep an accurate record of training. You know, robust record keeping is vital, particularly should there be any health and safety breaches or risks of in the workplace, or there's any you know, spread of infections or something like that. So it's best really to outline and record the training that has happened, but also, you know, what type of training it was, when that happened, you know, who delivered it, but fundamentally who attended from your workforce, and even more importantly than that, who did not attend, and you need to really follow up with them and ensure that they do receive the training. I'm going to look a little bit now about the impact of health and safety on the Employment Rights Order. So the Employment Rights Order is the framework of the majority of employment legislation in Northern Ireland, and it guarantees employees a number of protections in respect of workplace health and safety issues. And within Article 67, there is protection for employees who make what's called a qualifying disclosure of information, and that is where, if you have a worker who has disclosed to either the company or maybe to an external regulatory body, then that they believe that there is a risk to health and safety, then that employee is protected under Article 68 from what's called being subjected to a detriment. So essentially that an employee cannot be treated detrimentally if they leave their workplace because there is a reasonable belief of danger, or they refuse to return to work in the circumstances of any danger. There's a lot of case law about this, and really it has been taken to, I suppose, the key point that's considered is, well, what is a reasonable belief of danger? as an employee being reasonable in terms of thinking it's not safe to return to work. Of course, you have, as employers, have the duty to mitigate the risk as much as possible. And you have to demonstrate, as Ashley pointed out, that you've taken all steps reasonably practicable to ensure the workplace is safe. But you have to also, it's a bit of a balancing act. You have to be mindful of the fact that, well, first of all, if you were to dismiss an employee because they refused to return to work, well, if they had a reasonable belief of danger, they could have what's called an automatic unfair dismissal claim. And they also could be able to bring a claim for, health and safety breaches. The other thing is also to be mindful of discrimination laws or anti-discrimination. So really, there may be employees who in their belief, are at an increased risk of, say, COVID due to their age. Maybe they're older than others in the workforce. They could also be vulnerable because they have a disability, or perhaps they are pregnant. So you have to be mindful of age discrimination, sex discrimination, disability discrimination, and all of the equality guidelines. And really, any employee who has been treated detrimentally, whether that is being dismissed or suspended without pay, or in some way treated unfairly, they can bring a claim to the industrial tribunal. And I think we're actually going to see a lot more of that. So in terms then of, well, what can you do if for your employees, if you're maybe not able to operate at full capacity because of all these health and safety issues, or maybe it's that it's not actually safe for you to even be open, or maybe that's been determined by the government. In terms of the financial support that's available, the job support scheme was announced in September as a way of supporting viable jobs in businesses that were facing lower demand and would face lower demand over the winter due to the impact of COVID-19. Now, that was due to commence on the 1st of November. And then on Saturday there, on the 31st of October, there was an announcement made sort of quite out of the blue. And an announcement was made that the job support scheme is going to be postponed pending the extension of the coronavirus job retention scheme. Now, in terms of the coronavirus job retention scheme, that was due to end, as I said, there on Saturday, and it's been extended to provide support to businesses and employees during the new national lockdown, which commenced yesterday in England. Now, the job retention scheme was due to end, and then the job support scheme was to come into its place. As of yesterday afternoon, this all changed. So the coronavirus job retention scheme has now been extended until March 2021. And the job support scheme, as on the previous slide, has now been sort of postponed. Don't know whether it's even going to happen. It may just be that it doesn't happen at all. And then there is also the job retention bonus that was due to be paid next year for employers who had really retained their employees after a period of furlough, and a £1,000 payment was to be made per employee. And that also seems to have fallen by the wayside. So we don't have up-to-date details on that, other than the Chancellor said yesterday that the job retention bonus falls away due to the CGRS being extended. So the support available under the retention scheme is actually more generous than what it was in September and October. It is now back to the way it was back in August, with the government paying 80% of wages up to a cap of 2,500. Employers have to pay employer national insurance contributions and pension contributions for the hours that the employee is on furlough. And flexible furlough continues as well. Now, finally then, I just want to say a little bit about mental health. So I'm sure you all appreciate that this has been a difficult time, really since, I suppose, March was when everything all kicked off, and everything has changed so significantly in how we do our work, where we even do our work, and it has been difficult in people's personal lives due to well, illness for some families, and then also in terms of job security, you know, concerns for their own health, maybe a complete change in how they do their work, that they're now at home. So I thought it would be helpful to put in a little bit about this, just for employers to really consider this, as I think this is well, very much a growing problem. So 1 in 4 employees, or sorry, 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem at some point in their life. And really, if it's prolonged, of course, that can have physical and psychological damage. And really, with that, then, of course, you could be looking at an individual being deemed to be disabled under the Disability Discrimination Act, and as a result of ill mental health. And of course, employers cannot discriminate due to an employee having mental health issues. And then ultimately, employers also have a legal obligation and legal responsibility to help their employees, including those who have mental illness. So one of the key difficulties, I suppose, that everyone has encountered this year is working from home, in that it can be quite isolating for people. And really, a survey done by YouGov has found that nearly 2 out of 5 employees working from home have felt stressed, anxious, or experienced mental health difficulties due to their working condition. I'm actually surprised that it's not more. Maybe people only contact me when they have difficulties, but I would say the majority of employees and employers that I've been speaking to have been extremely stressed this year. And you know, this is down to the health crisis, but also the subsequent effect on the economy. People are concerned about job security, and I think it's something that employers should, I suppose, be mindful of, particularly because it's harder to spot signs of a mental health problem when the employee is working from home or they're furloughed. And then I think it's now the time really for employers to do as much as possible to promote awareness of the importance of health and well-being, and provide as much support as possible. So one of the very obvious solutions, or well, maybe not solutions, but one of the obvious ways to improve employee health and well-being is to maintain regular contact with the employees, check in on their well-being, ensure they have everything that they need in order to work effectively, but also ensure just that they're not so stressed that they are in any way ill, or that they haven't been stressed for a protracted period of time, and that really they feel adequately supported in their role. I read the other day about the charity Mind had done a survey whereby 1 in 5 employees have called in sick throughout the pandemic due to workplace stress. So, you know, there's knock-on effects here for the business as well. If your staff are struggling with their well-being, you know, there's absenteeism as a result. There's also staff retention issues. The charity Mind also said that 42% of the of employees have considered quitting due to the stress that they have been suffering from. So consider really any support that you can offer, whether that's maybe ensuring people are getting adequate time off to rest. Is it possible maybe that they could do less work for a period of time? Are there any reasonable adjustments that you must make under the Disability Discrimination Act for any disabled employees? And then I suppose it's important just to be understanding. Employees have you know, their own circumstances in terms of childcare, maybe caring responsibilities, maybe you know, a member of their family, or maybe the breadwinner in the household has become redundant. So there's all these stresses really, and of course you want to ensure that you're job retention is good, or your staff retention is good, and generally just keep in touch and be approachable. So that brings us to an end to the sort of formal part of today in terms of the presentation. And I can see that we do have some questions that have come through. And well, first of all, I can see Shane has put the COVID support at InterTradeIreland.com email address in the chat box there. And if you have any questions about that, please do get in contact about any of the content of today. One participant today has asked if you can get a copy of the slides. Of course, we will be able to send those out to you today. Either myself or one of our friends in InterTrade Ireland will assist with that. In terms then of any other questions, we are more than happy to answer any general queries that you might have. Any sort of specific queries, we can try and answer those now, or indeed we can contact you afterwards. So Ashley and I are going to, I suppose, keep our distance here in our boardroom as much as possible, whilst you, I suppose, put forward your questions. I hope you find it useful. It's a huge topic. There's an awful lot of detail in it. There's times when you think that an awful lot of health and safety law is sort of common sense, but it's so different now in that we're at a stage where I suppose there is so many changes that we need to, I guess, be mindful of keeping up to date as much as possible. So if anyone has any questions, please do send them through. Okay, well, if anyone has any afterwards, then if you think of any, please do email us. The COVID support email address is there. Oh, I can see one has just come through here. Is there any funds or aids available for changes that are needed for COVID related changes to the business, i.e. additional office space? Okay. In terms of, I know one of the recent changes to the government guidance on costs and funds for PPE was that there was zero tax to be paid on PPE. I know that was to end on the 31st of October, and I believe this question is about any funds or I suppose the provision of materials that can be made available to businesses. Ashley, are you aware of any organisations that can provide equipment or funding other than InterTrade Ireland, of course, who offer funded advice and assistance? Health and safety executive would be a good place to contact.
Yeah, and NI Business Info as well.
Yes, yes. Yeah, the NI Business Info website's actually very clear. It's easy to read, and they will keep sort of, I suppose, updated in terms of any grants that are available. The other thing is, I suppose, so I guess questions asked about any funds that might be available for, I suppose, making these changes. It might also be worth contacting your local council. See if maybe there is any sort of support in your council area that can provide you with maybe, I suppose, PPE or even signs for the workplace, maybe any, I suppose, other adaptations such as plexi glass screens and things. It is difficult for employers. I know there was a huge outcry in the media a while back where a lot of restaurants and bars had employed, all these measures such as putting in the plexiglass screens and the signs, markings on the floors, sanitizing stations that went up to all of these costs. And then unfortunately, all of a sudden, they had to close there, well, 3 weeks ago. And they paid all these sort of initial outlays. I suppose it depends on maybe your own organization or business as to maybe the support that's available. But I think health and safety executive website, NI Business Info, maybe your local council would be the sort of best places to try. And of course, InterTrade Ireland can also point you in the right direction. Okay, if anyone has any other questions, send them through. We'll give you maybe another minute or so. We've had some nice feedback through there, so thanks for that. And as we've said, it's a big topic, so if you need our help, get in contact. Okay, I'm guessing everyone's thinking it's Friday morning and it's time to have coffee and wind down for the week. So, well, if you do have any questions, like I said, send them through, and we're more than happy to answer any after this. So, hopefully, you all find today useful, and enjoy your Friday, and stay safe as well. So, all the best, and keep in touch.